What's up, y'all, and welcome to a brand new ShawnSetGO video. Today, we're going to be talking about just a little bit of the woes and problems with Mythic Plus, as per usual. But I've been spending this week and spending this time kind of getting used to Fury, kind of putting Prot to the side for a little while and just trying out Fury. So I wanted to come at this from a different perspective. As a melee DPS, I mean, I would love to play Resto, or I would love to play like Resto Shaman or like healer in general to kind of get used to that as well. But until then, I'm just going to provide a little bit of perspective on a post such as this. It's kind of a meme post out there. So take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. You know, just mostly jokes around here. But the meme is this. It says, nothing hurts more than depleting a key on the first pull. Your expensive consumables will wear off before you get invited to the next key. So as you can tell, this is going to be about Mythic Plus, but also that little second comment there that your consumables will wear off. I think this is the issue of, or like the grander issue, if we're going to talk about bigger conversations in WoW, is one, upgrading gear, and two, enchanting, maybe even embellishing, getting your embellished gear. And then on top of that, also unlocking jewel crafting slots, getting gems, enchanting all slots on your gear. You can even add extra gem slots, max those out. And so there's a lot of levels to, I think, gearing, beyond just the upgrades in WoW. And I think the big issue with gearing in WoW right now is that a lot of that gearing requires know-how that not everybody has, but sometimes people aren't willing to do. If your gear that you have is the highest you're willing to gear it, maybe you're not in that kind of case. But I think for a lot of people, the struggle is, well, this isn't my BIS, or this is the piece I need, but it's not the proper track. It's not myth track. Maybe it's hero track, and that's the max I want to do. But maybe I want to wait to upgrade my final piece of gear whenever it's myth track, you know, and get to that level. So I think there's a problem with, I think most people in experience of whether it's mythics or raiding, in being in this specific scenario where you're going to approach this situation, and most people, I think, go, it's a gold sink. It's a gold sink to do anything in WoW, when it comes to gearing. And it comes across the issue of, well, how do we generate gold? How do we generate gold in the world? And so the first comment says, it links to Wowhead, and it's the pausing pylon. The first response to that is it says, sure, it saves you from losing expensive flasks, but these still go for about 100 gold on the auction house currently. And of course, you know, flasks do persist through death, but of course the wasted time that you spend during that is a lot. And if you're considering, as far as, you know, raids and pauses and stuff like that, I would say it'd be very difficult to use this effectively. And you're kind of banking on things not being successful as well, because if you're clearing just fine, I wouldn't say this is the catch-all that you're looking for. But I think that it does raise a valid point, which is there is something that you can have to where if your mythic does wipe, fails on the first time, and you have to wait for that next mythic to set up, then at least there's something out there. And the first comment that says, maybe I'm just speaking from a position of the auction house goblin privilege here, but the weekly caches turn the Radiant Remnants in Hollowfall give like 1,600 gold apiece. Multiple world quests give 800 gold apiece when they're up for gold. And then world boss world quests give like 1K. I would say it's less that. I would say it's like the weeklies, like the weeklies for sure. The caches, I'd say I am more often than not get like a couple hundred gold, not really like 1,000 gold in my experience. And then this one says, I'm just sad that Skywriting World Quest dropped from 550 gold per completion to something like 170 gold. Yeah, I would say it is kind of sad that there isn't a whole lot of gold generation from other world quests. Like there's specifically the gold generating quest, and you could probably generate, I would say 2 to 3K gold in those quests. And, if you do all of them and if you do your weeklies, probably another couple thousand gold in that. So I would say there's enough to get you by, but I would say it's enough to get you by in one type of activity. If you're doing mythics, I would say you're gonna spend 1,000 gold after, like, I would say four mythics. Just, a couple of deaths here and there, you're gonna spend 1,000 gold. And same thing with delves. Delves, you're gonna get some deaths. I would say delves is probably the not necessarily the easiest, but like it's the easiest to generate gold because you get tons of junk that you can vendor. Now you can vendor stuff in mythics, but the cost versus how much value you're getting from the pieces of gear doesn't quite offset each other. And so this is going to be my main point of this, which I think is, frankly, mythics don't generate enough gold for the players who are trying mythics. I think that often, if you're doing mythics and you're doing them well, you're still going to be eating away at your own gold supplies. So you have to do stuff in between those queues. But my experience in DPS, as a DPS in queues, is that you have to actively be in each selected listing and just constantly pending. Like, you can't, as much as they memed on it with the anniversary, with the ability to play the Rumble app, I guess is as well as WoW at the same time. It's just, you can't. You have to actively be in queues and kind of pressing queues, looking at the queues and going, okay, this is a good one to join. Because even as a DPS, even though you're not often the one posting the one, you're better off being a tank or a healer. You have to be kind of selective as a DPS on who you're going to queue with. You want to queue with people who have decent rating. You want to queue with people who have decent, like, you kind of want to make some cursory, like, ideas in your brain as far as what you're going to pick. And so there's simply no time to kind of auto farm or have something in the background, because you're going to be constantly pressing queue stuff to, like, get it going. So my honest thoughts with it are that maybe this needs to be a change with how things queue, but I think that's a different video. This is a different conversation if we're talking about, well, this is how queuing should go in the future. But I personally think that the struggle here is that when you experience this, it's not necessarily that depleting a key should never happen. Simply put, some people key for things that are too high, the much higher than their skill level. I can do +8s, +9s pretty simply, but I haven't really tried for +10s. But I'm assuming that once it gets higher and higher, this happens. It just tends to happen more and more, because there's a lot of people who sort of bite off more than they can chew. And that's just kind of the way it is, unfortunately. The one thing I wish for retail had from Classic, that is thingamajig they used to save the world buffs in vanilla. Like the, gosh, what is it? I think it was like hourglass or something like that, but like you could freeze your world buffs, would make this whole process feel less painful. Yeah. So the pausing pylon, once again, for those of you who don't know, pausing pylon drops a pylon that will disrupt natural metabolic process of players standing nearby, halting the expiration of Khazalgar flasks, files, and well-fed effects. The pylon is extremely fragile and will detonate in the presence of violence. Honestly, since this kind of works in raid groups, this is really effective in raid groups, because you can basically have raid pauses and not worry about buffs. But I think you should extend this effect to not only working in mythics like it's saying, but also having a way to effectively pause for the players who gotta pee mid mythic, like, or something like that, or something happens, maybe in that type of sense. But 100%, I think that could work in a certain way. I don't think that it'll ever happen, because I think that people mostly are against it, because the idea that bots could introduce other players, like you basically play up until a certain point, bring in new players, have the new players come in, clear the boss, and then wash, rinse, repeat. Like it's something like that. So I think it could work for mythics to allow essentially a pause button on mythics before those situations, but I think they would require too much policing for it to actually work, unfortunately. Honestly, people get way too butthurt about the bad first pull, especially about the padded timers with what is essentially a full wipe for free. I've had plenty of keys where the first or second pull went bad, especially places like Grim Batal and Necrotic Wake, and we still toed the key no problem, but most people hit a single hiccup and just leave. The other thing is I've been noticing more and more as a DPS is that with a good healer and a decent tank as well, you can have a lot of people just fully clear a boss. So, you know, like maybe like half health. If they're decent, they can do just fine. 3 minutes. It's not going to get you time, but like there's a lot of things certain classes have to avoid full wipes. It's just that in those moments of panic, a lot of people go, well, it's done. And they start to give up and they start to underperform. And the game also kind of designs it in a way to where if you do mess up, then it's going to be harder and harder to pick up the slack. So it's a mix of dungeon design and player skill, but I think the game doesn't necessarily challenge you in a way that isn't just kill you on the first side of trouble. But then also in those moments where you don't get killed in the first side of trouble, then people don't really have the experience to like essentially avoid that in the end. So, and that's for me. You know, I died in a few boss fights in a +9. And I was like, crap, I died in +9. I get B-res and then I get B-res right on top of the orb and I die again. And I was like, oh, well, what is this like? Because I'm tank. So it's like if I'm dead, it's a wipe, right? So so definitely strange situations. But I think that's definitely a valid concern that people have, that it's a lot of people leaving very first sign of trouble. I want to say that it's usually if the tank can't perform, they're not going to be able to perform better. Same thing with healer. It's very much like if it's DPS, it's very much not a problem. A lot of times that's where the slack is kind of carried up. But for tanks and healers, if they're not performing in the beginning, it's not going to happen later on whenever it gets harder. So as a tank, I have no idea what you mean. Yeah. I don't flask until the first boss. I think the other thing that a lot of people ignore as well is that, and I don't know if it was said in this comments here, but to be honest, getting your rank 3 flask, yes, like Flask of Alchemical Chaos, I think on my server is running about 700 gold. But in reality, it's only a small uptick from a level 2 flask, and level 2 flasks go for about 150 gold. You could say the same thing about like food buffs, etc. So I don't think it's that big of a deal to go one step down for your mythics. I think if you're getting flasks, if you're getting your own personal food buff, if you have potions beyond just health stones, if you got bandages, wow. I mean, I don't think I've ever used a bandage in dungeons, even though I have them. But if you're doing all those things, then you're leagues above the next person up. Not a lot of people are going to be doing that just on your casual pug mythics. Just as a standard. So if you're doing that, you're already in the upper tier percentage. So I know this concern is definitely valid. I think there's a lot of people who definitely go through this a number of times in a key. I do think it's a problem that it's behind sort of a singular profession, and that, you know, really it's just a one-off use type of thing. As opposed to if you clear a mythic that, you know, say you have like 45 minutes left, that doesn't automatically just kind of give it to you. I would say that that's where I would probably use it the most, is that if I go through a clear and I have my flasks and stuff like that on, is I would use it at the end of a clear. I don't know if I would use a pausing pylon in the middle of a raid, because then you're just kind of like pause, go, pause. You're using too many. But between mythics, for sure. Yeah, I could see that being a valid way of doing things. Some people like to use their personal buffs on the first boss, like someone said. I think that it's something that I prefer to use if I can see we're falling behind, or if the deaths start to kind of rack up, just to amp up my DPS just a little bit. Maybe speed up our time a little bit. As a DPS is what I've been kind of doing. I don't know if that's the right methodology, but that's how I personally perceive it. It's just if you're helping out a little bit, and personally as a DPS, the way I see it is if I can get first on DPS, fantastic. But if I can make that gap even bigger and have even higher DPS, then that means we can pick up the slack in that type of way. But that's just kind of my tank mindset about things. I don't know how everyone thinks about that way, but that's basically the gist of it. So just not to drag this on. I hope this video was helpful for you in some way. Maybe you learned about bossing pylons or like flasks and what kind of items you should keep in the mythics. I think that everyone should do these, not just because you have to, but just because it makes things a little bit easier. That way you're not relying on somebody else to have the buffs, or somebody else to pick up the slack, kind of do what you can personally. But I do personally think if we're thinking about overall improvements of the game, I do think that there should be more like golds that allows people to make these mistakes. Personally, I think that I spend every single week, by the end of the week, I'm almost out of gold because I'm actively doing things to make sure I get like biz crafts and to increase my blacksmithing, but then also to pay off plate repair bills and to tank delves or to DPS delves, or same thing with mythics or with raiding. So it ends up costing me a lot more gold than I have time to earn. And I also do like small crafting like sales, like I sell resources too. So it's like I know I'm doing the medium amount and I'm still struggling with gold. I'm not like an auction house connoisseur, but it seems kind of low. So what do you think are the ways that we can introduce ways for players to earn enough gold to have more items like these and consumables like these? But also, what do you think is the methodologies for improving mythic state so people don't feel like they're having to waste these things? It kind of feels like in video games where you save all these potions and by the end of the game you have like a zillion potions because you're like, I don't want to use it yet because maybe if I'll need it later, and then you never end up using it. Kind of feels like one of those moments. So let me know in the comments. Of course, subscribe to the page if you're here, and then if you enjoyed the video, give it a like. On top of that, we do stream live on twitch.tv/ShawnSetGO, as well as YouTube live on occasion. So subscribe to us there on both of those pages. But until next time, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.